In this video, we will show you how to replace your lower door hinge on this Mercury Grand Marquis. Let's get started. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. To gain access to the hinge, we're going to have to remove some of our trim panels. This can be done using a plastic trim tool. We'll carefully get underneath this area and gently pop it up. You can have a look along the bottom. Set that aside. Let's move into this area. Directly behind the hood handle is where you're going to find a plastic panel. We'll use a small pick and gently pry this out of place. Now we can start removing this kick panel along here. When we do this, we're going to be trying to pull it rearward. I'll use my trim tool, carefully get in between this area. You can see one of the push clips up here. Try to pop that out. There's another one down this way. Slide this out of place. There's those push clips. Before we go any further with the lower hinge, let's make sure that we mark where the original hinge is located on the body of the vehicle and where it's mounted to the door itself. Typically, when you do this, you want to try to use a paint marker of some sort. I'll just go ahead and use what I've got. I'm going to come right in here, make a line. We'll do the same down along the bottom. And then for good measure, it's right along here. Now we can do the area where the hinge mounts to the door itself. Let's mark where the upper hinge meets with the body of the vehicle. And now where the hinge meets the door. The next thing you want to do is make sure you have some support underneath the door itself. I'm using 2 jack stands, and you'll notice that I put a pad in between the jack stand and the door so I don't damage the paint. It's extremely important. The next thing we'll do is put down the window, and we're going to try to slide a blanket in between the door and whatever it is you're going to be resting it against. Once again, to protect the paint. At this point, we're going to start dismounting the door from the hinges. To do that, you'll find that you have 2 13mm headed bolts holding each hinge to the door. Remove all 4 mounting bolts. Keep in mind, as you do this, the door is going to come loose and you want to make sure that it is secured. Let's do the same to the lower. There we are, that's broken free. Now we're going to grab onto the door carefully and start pulling it away from the door jamb, being extremely careful not to scratch any of our paint or damage the wiring. There we are. Let's continue on with the trim tool. We're looking for a little black push pin right along this area. Go ahead and carefully pop that out of place. I'll get right behind here. There's our push pin. Now you can gently pull this aside. Once you have the insulation out of the way, we're going to be looking at this big wiring harness right here. If you were to make your way directly behind that, you can sort of see that there's a 13mm headed nut right inside this area. Go ahead and remove that nut. There's that. Now let's make our way to that outer bolt. We'll access this between the fender and the outer aspect of the door. Just hold on to that hinge so it doesn't fall. There's our mounting bolt. Remove your hinge. There it is, friends. With the original hinge out of there, continue on to cleaning and inspecting the body of the vehicle where your new hinge will ride. Before we can install the hinge, you need to make sure you have it in the open position. The way it's shipped is in the closed position. So if you have a vise of some sort, you can hold down one aspect of the hinge and then use a prying device to carefully get on the other side and gently open this. There we are. Let's get over to the vehicle. Now with the hinge in the open position, we can continue with our installation. You'll find that you have one stud that protrudes outward. That needs to go into the body of the vehicle. Then we'll start on our 13mm headed mounting nut on the inside of the passenger compartment. Go. Now as you can see, the hole that this slides into is a squared out hole, but in the area where the nut was originally is the area that the hinge needs to be aligned before we can snug this up. Let's start this on by hand. We'll just lightly bottom this out so we can still pivot the hinge around as needed. There we are. Let's make our way in between the door and the fender and start in our 13mm headed mounting bolt. We'll get this lightly bottomed out as well. There we are. The next thing you want to do is look at your alignment points that we had written on the body of the vehicle. Align the hinge as close as possible to the original position of the original hinge. Once you've done that, go ahead and snug up your mounting hardware and then torque it to 22 foot-pounds. That one's torqued. From inside the passenger compartment, we'll continue on with our 13mm nut. We'll torque this to 22 foot-pounds as well. Once you have the hinge mounted to the vehicle, we're going to continue on to mounting the hinges to the door. Now, when you do this, we're going to have to slide the door back up against the hinges, and you want to make sure that it's aligned properly before you continue on by tightening any of the mounting bolts. We'll just bring this right over, hold it in place, and then start in all 4 of our mounting bolts. At this point, you might find that you have to wiggle the door up and down or even forward and backward to get everything aligned properly. We'll leave that nice and loose. Do the same to the other 3. All right, we'll leave that one loose as well. Continue down the line. The next thing we want to do is try to make sure that the door aligns properly. If it doesn't, you can try to adjust the door at the hinge where it connects to the door itself, or at the hinge where it connects to the body of the vehicle. Once it's aligned, snug up each of the bolts and then torque these to 22 foot-pounds as well. Before we torque that mounting hardware, let's continue on to checking the alignment of the door. While you're doing this, be extremely slow and careful. You don't want to damage your paint. We just want to make sure everything lines up properly. Just pay attention to the body lines. Once that looks like it's good, let's make sure it latches. Double check all of the body lines, making your way around the door to make sure it's not hitting anywhere it shouldn't. Assuming that looks good, let's continue on to tightening that mounting hardware and torquing it to 22 foot-pounds. Let's get this insulation aligned and put in our plastic push pin. Get that aligned. Let's move along to our trim panel. We remember that we had those 2 push clips. And on the far end, you also have this hook. We're going to go ahead and slide this into position, aligning our hook and our push pins. Just move this out of the way. Those lined up with their hole, press them in. Let's get our weather seal in place. Let's continue on to this piece. We'll have the slot facing towards the left. Slide it right on over this. Get it in position and lock it in. Now we can do the side trim panel. We'll have a look from the bottom. You have all these alignment pitons making their way across and one locking clip. You can see the holes for all the alignment pitons, and then the clip goes right along this ridge. With the car all back together, let's just test the door functionality one last time. Perfect. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.